Travis Croft, how are you, sir?
I am fine and dandy. Never a more apt description has been made. I am a hammer looking for a nail. As they say, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. We've got I think we've got a pretty good show this week.
We have.
We've actually got 3 things that we've both seen.
Yeah, we've converged, kind of on purpose, I guess. Are we planning things now?
Fuck that! No. We don't plan.
No,
tried that once, didn't like it.
We've got our new chain movie following on from Only the Brave last week. We followed Josh Brolin to 2008's Oliver Stone movie W. We have got the season finale of WandaVision, and we both went to the cinema to watch an actual new movie release of Chaos Walking, starring Tom Holland, Daisy Ridley, and directed by Doug Liman.
And of course, don't forget Mads Mikkelsen.
Very true.
The probably like the only other person who plays as many villains as him is Christoph Waltz and Ben Mendelsohn.
Yeah, that's true. And apparently, Mads Mikkelsen has been hired to replace Johnny Depp as Grindelwald in the Fantastic Creatures Harry Potter saga.
They should start like their own Legion of Doom.
Ooh.
Legion of Doom actors division, right? Like people who only play bad guys.
Yeah.
Clancy Brown.
Yeah.
Those 3 guys.
Clancy Brown, Mads Mikkelsen, Ben Mendelsohn. Who was the other one we were talking about?
Christoph Waltz.
Christoph Waltz. Yep. Who else? Like who would be the 5th person on this Legion of Doom?
What's the guy's name? Is it Jeff Leong? He's been in about 400 million movies, and he's always like the kung fu bad guy. He played about 15 different people in Jeff Hong. I think his name is Jeff Hong. He was in that Big Trouble in Little China. He played the floating guy.
James Hong.
Yeah.
Yes.
James Hong. Yeah.
Yeah, he would be a very good addition. He'd be a very good addition. Yeah.
Look, if you've got somebody, if you think someone who should be in the cinematic Legion of Doom with Christoph and the guys, it always plays bad guys because spoiler alert for Chaos Walking. As soon as Mads Mikkelsen's walked onto the screen, he's a bad guy.
Yeah, I reckon that M. Night Shyamalan should actually just do a movie with all of those people that we mentioned, and the twist is that they're actually all nice guys. That's
in the end, the villain's Tom Cruise.
Yeah,
if Tom would do it.
I reckon he'd do it. I mean, he does occasionally do some weird choices, like that Len Grossman character from Tropic Thunder.
That was good. I was always looking forward to the Len Grossman movie they were gonna make and never did.
Yeah.
Probably couldn't make it now because I think it was very loosely based on one of the Weinsteins.
Yeah,
and I don't think that would fly today, considering we know what we do.
Yeah. Well, unless it was a complete and utter character assassination style piece.
Even then, I think it
could kind of work, but it would be controversial. But let's get on with the show. Let's get straight into our review of W. So this is, as I said at the top of the show, this is the 2008 Oliver Stone movie. And I remember when this was first announced, there was a lot of hoo-ha. People were kind of going, wow, Oliver Stone is really anti-Republican. He is anti-war. You just look at some of the movies that he's made in the past. He has been very, very open about his political stances against kind of war and the advanced radical right, and a lot of people are kind of wondering how brutal is he going to be with George W. Bush, former president of the United States of America, who was kind of made famous because he was president during September the 11th, as well as his war on terror. and the axis of evil, and a few taglines that really summed up a lot of the most memorable elements, shall we say, of his career. This is an interesting movie because there's not a biography of George W. Bush. I don't think it ever was trying to be.
It's kind of. I mean, it kind of does cover some of the important moments in his life.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on this movie?
I just like to start by saying anybody who was scandalized by the fact that Oliver Stone was anti-Republican, anti-war, are going to be shocked when they hear that the sun is expected to rise tomorrow morning, because of course he fucking is.
Yep.
Of course he fucking is. He always has been. Have you seen fucking Platoon? I mean, you know, interestingly, he and Bush were both in Yale's class of 1968. So they would have been graduating in the same year had Stone not signed up to go to Vietnam himself, which he did. What do I think of him? I honestly kind of think it's a story of a game of two halves. Part of his film is exceptionally well done, I think. The rest of it, I think, kind of falls a little bit flat. The part that's really well done is the story of George Bush, where he came from. So George Bush pre-president is quite interesting, I think, and really well done. In the sense, it's not a character assassination.
No,
it would have been something that would have surprised people when this film came out, because people need to remember this film came out in October 2008, I think. So Bush was still in office when this film for another 4 months or so. He couldn't run again, so he was a lame duck president. So we all knew at that point in time he wouldn't be president, beyond January 2009. But the fact that he was making a biopic about a sitting president while that president was still in office was, mind-blowing. He had made presidential biopics before, presidential films before. He made JFK, which is overrated. He made Nixon, which I've never seen, but but both those guys were obviously, and JFK was obviously dead, and Nixon, I think, was well and truly out of office, and I think probably or maybe dead as well.
I think it's charming that you think JFK's dead.
He's working in the Falklands with Tupac. But anyway, so I think what is interesting and what I enjoyed most about it this time and last I saw it, which is probably when it came out, is it's actually reasonably almost sympathetic at times to the character of George W. Bush.
It's kind of an innocence to the way that they really display him. He's like one of the things that was kind of a linchpin for when he first ran for office was that he was the representative that you wanted to have a beer with. And he does kind of come across as that. So like I've met people like this guy. He's relatively talented, relatively intelligent. He fucks around a lot. He's kind of got a heart in the right place, but he's also trying to bat above his weight kind of thing. And it's not an assassination. It's not a parody. It's not an out and out mockery, but it doesn't shy away from showing some of his weaker moments.
I think it's a portrait of a very flawed individual.
Yeah.
A deeply flawed man with significant deep-seated psychological issues, or maybe that's a little bit strong. But yeah, I mean, the central thesis of Stone's film is this is a man, George W. Bush, who could never live up to the family legacy. For those who don't know, I mean, his dad was president for one term. George H.W. Bush, from 88 to 92, who's vice president. Under Reagan for 8 years, he was head of the CIA. Before that, I think, or at some point during that, before that, head of the CIA. Trying to remember my timeline here. He was a fucking war hero, and that's alluded to in the film. And he's third generation. Before him was Prescott Bush, who, again, the film points out when he's being initiated in Skull and Bones that Prescott Bush was, one of the founders of that group, and again, a highly, rich, famous individual. And I think it goes back beyond him as well. I'm not completely au fait with a Bush line, but he's a very famous American family. And that had this incredible legacy and reputation and respect amongst the American people. And that his father looms large over George's entire life. He constantly feels like he's living in his father's shadow. And pretty much everything he seems to do seems to be an effort to get out from underneath his father's shadow, to the point of running for president as a way to sort of prove himself of being worthy and to get out from under that shadow, and ultimately acquire his father's love and approval and respect, to get his dad to say, "I'm proud of you." Now, I find it a pretty compelling explanation of why Bush is the way he was. Don't know how anywhere close to the truth it might be. You sort of alluded to it at the start. Stone is a well-known leftist who had no time for Bush and his wars. So, take everything he says about him with a grain of salt. But I think he's saying, again, it's interesting that we're looking at somebody here who is a deeply flawed individual. And I don't think the film's kicking him in the head for it and going, this guy's a fucking asshole, hate him. Here's all the things the reasons should hate him. It's basically pointing out this guy, this is why he did what he did. This is why he became who he did. And I mean, I think it's actually a very human story in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I think you mentioned it before. This was one of the movies that really shone a spotlight on Josh Brolin as an actor. He really does amazingly well with the character of George W. Bush, because it is a persona that he takes on, and there is a lot of it's come through the years now that Josh Brolin has become a very household name and a very well respected actor. It's come through that he is a guy kind of akin to the way that George Bush was presenting himself to the people, where he seems very open and very approachable. He just seems like a nice guy that you want to have a conversation with, have a bit of a laugh with. And he's absolutely a great fit for the way that they showcase George W. Bush. And he really does.
He got the mannerisms and the accent and the speech patterns down perfectly.
Yeah, he really did, because there's very little kind of makeup prosthetics to make him look more like George W. Bush. It was really nice how they used filters to make scenes that they were filming age them so it looks like archived footage without it actually being the case. Similarly, a great representation of skill from Elizabeth Banks.
She was given a fairly thankless role in a sense. Her character wasn't given very much to do, but she makes the best of it.
Yeah, and then of course, kind of rounding off the Bush family, you've got James Cromwell, who's something of a bit of a living legend in the acting world. I would say he's kind of the weakest out of the four leads, just because it's the way that he presented George Sr. is very typical of a lot of James Cromwell's elder statesman kind of roles that he's done. It's like it still very much works in the relationship and the repartee that he has with his son is fantastic. But it's not too much of a stretch from what we've seen from James Cromwell previously, and Ellen really Bernstein as well.
Just play himself, really. You're right. I mean, Bush was a Texan as well, and he didn't quite have the drawl that his son did. But if I think back to hearing George Bush Sr. talk, he had a very distinctive accent and way of speaking as well. And whereas you could close your eyes and hear Brolin talk and almost imagine you were hearing George W. Bush.
Yeah.
Cromwell just kind of did him. himself, right? He
Yeah.
didn't do any kind of accent or characterization of George
Yeah.
H.W. Bush. He just kind of he could be playing the president from Sum of All Fears for all we know, right? Like it's just
it's kind of a generic position, and Ellen Bernstein,
person.
yeah,
So from
she's
Peter, she doesn't have
from
much to do. She's such a great actor.
yeah, she's a really fantastic actor, and anyone who questions that, just go and watch Requiem for a Dream. She's fucking phenomenal in it. But the little that she has, she comes across strong and very much in character. But again, it's not too much beyond the realms of what we've seen from her before either. That kind of stuck in her ways, egotistical elder states lady, which fits for the family, of course. Of course, it fits for the Bush dynasty, shall we say? But they still deliver great performances. But whereas it was quite a transformative position for Josh Brolin, the rest didn't do it quite as good a justice. And we're just talking about the Bush family here. This has got quite a cast in it, with Jeffrey Wright involved. We've got
Tandy Newton, Scott Glenn, Richard Dreyfuss.
Yeah, and God, what's the other guy?
Toby Jones.
Toby Jones, that's the one. Yes, all really good. I was confused a little bit by the mannerisms of Thandie Newton's character.
She was playing, I don't know if you remember Condoleezza Rice particularly well.
No.
You're not missing much. But she was a fairly high-profile member of the Bush cabinet. I forget exactly which is Secretary of State. That was Powell. I don't know, National Security Advisor, exactly what her role was. But she was high profile. And I felt like Tandy did a good job. I mean, I've seen some people criticize it as it was a parody of Condi Rice. But I just looked at it straight away. I'm like, that's Condoleezza Rice. I know exactly who she's playing. A couple of others, you're like, Scott Glenn, I think, was playing Rumsfeld. He looks nothing like Donald Rumsfeld. And no effort was made for him to look like Donald Rumsfeld. So, you go, I think he's supposed to be playing Rumsfeld because only Rumsfeld was a big enough dickhead to say something like that. So, and I'm pretty familiar with key players of the Bush era. So I thought she was fine. Jeffrey Wright, I thought he did a wonderful job as Colin Powell. I think he even looked reasonably a little bit like him. These mannerisms and his speech patterns again were on point.
Absolutely agree. I think because I remember this movie, and I remember going out to watch it in the cinema and thinking this is going to be an interesting movie, and there is definitely a lot of interest. But going back to what you said at the start of A Tale of Two Movies, essentially, it has things that it's trying to say, but at the same time, a lot of it feels very vapid and just kind of floating nebulously, and then you get these little elements, and some of it still retains that level of poignancy, but otherwise it's just kind of like, all right, I don't know how successful this movie actually is at doing what it's trying to do. It's got a lot of talent involved, and people are doing very well with what they're doing, but I don't quite know why this movie needed to exist. I
think you're right. I think you're right for one reason. That's because they made it too soon. I think some time, some context, and some understanding as history goes on is necessary to really tell a good story about someone and look, I mean, he's happily forgotten now, and in some ways fondly remembered after some of their recent presidents. But he is a important figure in the sense that he got them into two wars and left in the middle of a depression. Not his choice, in fairness. So I think if Stone had waited a year, 2 years, because I mean, this film cuts off before the GFC, and the GFC was a really important part of his presidency. And because they started filming is probably at the start of 2008, I'm guessing. maybe late 07. They've kind of missed out the last chunk of Bush's presidency. So it's an incomplete story, and it had incomplete context as to who he was, so the length of his presidency. And, I think some time and some context would have made a more interesting story. But he could have. So you're right. This film doesn't quite pull it off. And I think wherever the line for me is between pre-president, post-president. Most of the stuff after he's president is just sort of kind of vapid and kind of like, remember when he did this? Remember when he did that? Remember the yellow cake speech that was bullshit? Remember the WMDs? And I think what Stone's trying to do is trying to draw a line from remember this thing that happened when he was a kid. Now this is what he's doing when he's in office, and this is all in service to the deeper, thing he needs to be trying to do to make it up to his dad. And because he's dealing with 2/3 of the presidency, I don't think he can actually tie the string around it properly. And
it just feels incomplete somehow.
I kind of thought to myself, imagine if someone had done this with Trump. In the sense they made a film, in last year.
Yeah.
Right? They started filming at the start of 2020. Or maybe late 2019. Let's say filming wrapped in February 2020, because that's probably 8 months. 8 months for post-production for a film is probably.
I'd say that's fair.
Probably reasonable, like this, editing and dubbing and blah blah blah. So you miss COVID, you miss the election, you miss the fucking insurrection, you miss the whole failing to hand over the keys after the election. I mean, like, so much shit that he is. You're making time movies about what he did last year.
Yeah.
About fucking what he did in March last year. So, in fairness, Bush, for all his flaws, was nowhere near as bad as Trump. But, well, that's arguable. But anyway, it just sort of felt like it was too soon. And I think also it would be interesting if he'd made a film about Bush now.
Yeah. Because I don't know whether it would have the same potential impact if they went back and just did a George W. Bush movie now, because of everything that has happened since in the political landscape of America. It all kind of strangely feels tame. But at the same time, there are elements of it that you kind of like. I was particularly captivated by a lot of the press scenes, the press junket scenes, like where George is standing there and says, you Chinatown lady.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, what? The 10 years difference. That phrase would have been thrown on every social media site. There would have been hashtag movements for it. It would have been destroyed. And it was nothing in that point.
Unless Trump said it, because let's face it, he probably said worse at some point. He made fun of a disabled guy.
Well, yeah, that's my point, is going back and then kind of trying to point out these elements of sexism in the George Bush administration or anything like that. So like, yeah, but Trump's done way worse. I don't know if it's looking at it isolating and just looking at the cause and effects of George W. Bush as president and his time going into it, through, and after. Looking at him, he is a very interesting character, especially when you look at the father-son relationship and that emotional drive that he had. That is in itself interesting, but if you're looking at a political movie, it's just I don't know whether it would be able to actually get out from the shadow of Trump anymore.
It would be interesting to place it in historical context. With what came afterwards, both in Obama and Trump. It would definitely be, and interesting, as I said, it was actually a little bit in the last 12 months. You kind of had like a little bit of like, I've had literally people to me who I used to have raging arguments about, fucking Trump, fucking Bush conversations with. They're kind of like, yeah, I called him a Nazi a few times and kind of feel bad about that now. They've got like a someone who's much, much closer to a Nazi. Like, my good friend Amber, who lives in Sacramento now, she was living in Melbourne in 2004.
Mm.
We went to a bar one night, and then we caught we shared a cab with a bunch of randos home back to my place because it was one of those maxi taxis with lots of seats. Mm-hmm. And so they followed about 8 people, and they're all going in the same direction. And these blokes were sitting behind us, Aussies, and they found out she was an American. And this, I guess, would have been, late 2008. They're like, "Oh, who did you vote for? Who did you vote for? Who did you vote for? Did you vote for Bush? You voted for Bush, and you voted for that warmonger Bush." And to this day, those blokes don't know how lucky they are that Amber was feeling reasonably chill that night and didn't kick their ass, because I would have backed him. But that kind of sentiment was around even in Australia, right? Like, not even an American. The only American in the conversation was Amber, who wasn't real keen on saying who she voted for. And I should note, in case she ever listens to this, she did not vote for fucking Bush. Hi,
Amber.
But yeah, it was a blood ran hot at the time about who it was. But like, you go now, and you're like, and I've had conversations with my friend Amber going, yeah, maybe he wasn't so bad.
Yeah,
I gotta take him over Trump any day of the week. At least you knew you were going to get with Bush. Yeah. It would be interesting now, but if this is, as we said at the start, he's a reasonably sympathetic tone film, but he doesn't come out of it smelling great. I mean, I read a quote somewhere that said this film makes Bush more of a pawn but a Dark Knight, to use a Queen's Gambit reference.
Okay. I'm going to nod and pretend I understand that.
He was not the man behind the curtain. He was being manipulated by the people around him to make these kind of decisions, which was always the argument with Bush. It was Cheney who was pulling the strings. Interesting. This would make a very interesting double feature with Vice.
I was going to say, I wonder how it sits, kind of pairing up the interpretation done by Christian Bale. So,
interestingly, Bale was originally cast as W. Bush in this film.
Oh, that would have been an interesting moment of history, him playing Bush and then playing the guy behind Bush.
Would he have gone on to play Cheney? Who knows? But he was originally cast as George W. Bush, underwent weeks of prosthetics testing before filming began. However, he withdrew from the production at the last minute, prompting Oliver Stone to immediately look for a replacement. But I found myself having the same thought. As like, I would like to. I don't really have time this week to go back and watch Vice straight afterwards. But they make an interesting pairing, because people do say it was Cheney was the power behind the throne, the brains, the evil genius who orchestrated basically led Bush by the nose to making all the horrible decisions he made. But I will say, criticism from me. They've made a few. This film finds a lot of opportunities to slip in famous Bush misquotes.
Yes.
Like, rarely is the question asked, "Are our children learning?" You fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, you don't get shamed again. You don't get fooled again. Like that whole, and it's all out of context. And I'm a nerd. I geek out on US politics significantly. But I know he didn't say that when he was running for governor. Are our children learning? And the other one, you don't fool me again. Like, that was famously said at a press conference, not I think it was in a private conversation in the movie. And I'm like, Oliver Stone, this is a bit beneath what you've been doing today. Like, you've kind of been, like I said, we've been hands off a little bit and a bit more of an intellectual exploration of his character, and now you're going to go kick him in the balls a few times before we show him the door.
Yeah. I wonder. Part of me wonders if this movie was originally written to be longer and go into a little bit more, because it feels like one of the things that we've talked about with filming biographies of people's lives is so often they get it wrong by just kind of going, oh yeah, we're going to try and tell every major element of this person's life from birth to death. But I think both of us agree that it is more of an important and useful narrative storytelling tool to just focus on 1 to 3 in a movie. But at the same time, I feel like is a little bit informative of the character of Bush that they are at least presenting in the movie, where his attention is somewhat fleeting and jumping around a little bit. And I don't know whether I would have liked it, or if it would have served the story better to spend a little bit more time in these periods of time that they focus on in the movie, or if it would feel even more vapid and empty because that's just not the way that they're presenting this story.
I agree. I think he probably would have. I mean, we talked. I always come back to, I think the best biopic I can think of in recent memory is the Aaron Sorkin Steve Jobs film, not the Ashton Kutcher one.
Although that's not terrible.
It's not terrible. It's not as bad as people say it is. I think the Aaron Sorkin version is better, though. In a sense, they pick 3 key moments in Steve Jobs' life, and he uses the story of those 3 moments to tell the story about who Steve Jobs was. And I always come back to this. I think that's a really effective structure for a biopic. I think maybe something like that would have worked better here. And if maybe you could have ended him being inaugurated, right?
Yeah.
Because the story of what happened afterwards was yet to be told. Or if you really want to tell the story of his presidency, tell the story of his presidency, but wait until it's done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think maybe a key moment there, if you want to tell a moment before he's president and 2 when he is, one in hindsight might have been the famous speech, the Axis of Evil speech. That was a big one. It sort of summed up the post 9/11 one. And then the next one might have been him fucking everything up during the GFC. I don't know. But use a similar storytelling tactic like that might have been, or structure might have been a more effective way of doing it. Sort of jumping back and forth, forwards and backwards, and who's this person again? And and I wonder, did you? I mean, you're this is not a dig, but you're just smart enough to be interested in more interesting things than I am. But did you have trouble knowing who all those people were, like all the cabinet members?
I think it was around Bush being elected that I started paying a bit more attention to world politics. And so I remembered some of them, but it was difficult for me to actually keep track of them. I kept on having to bring up IMDb and go, oh, yeah, that's who that is. All right, cool. Yep, I remember some things about them coming out. But I don't think that's necessarily too much to the disservice of the movie, because it is about W, and everyone is kind of tangential to it, but they all kind of merge into just this cacophony that you get these occasional little elements of sort of like, oh, it's Cheney pushing the lead. Like there's the sit down meal that they have, and he's talking about he's like starts just taking the lettuce out of his sandwich and stuff. Is like that was actually a really good, clever way of insinuating this power behind the throne relationship. And then it was beautifully highlighted by him just saying, oh, just one more thing. Don't forget, I'm in charge here. And it's like, okay, yep, it's very much, if you have to say that you're in charge, you're not in charge.
It was a nice little ego sort of flash. It was. I wonder if maybe we could have got David Ayers into direct this, and he could have done like a little music video intro of like every single one of the
Suicide Squad style.
Like Cheney,
likes, dislikes, favorite weapon.
This is Dick Cheney. He's got my back. His sword captures the souls of everyone it kills. It works.
Kind of.
Well, David needs a job because, Anyway, I was wondering that. I'm like, I know who these people are. And like I said, occasionally you're like, just sort of through osmosis, you're going like, I think that's supposed to be Rumfield. And I think that guy's Wolfowitz. Yeah. And I'm like, the other guy, I mean, Toby Jones. I'm guessing it's Karl Rove. And you're like, again, if you weren't super well versed in US politics, who are these people? Why are they important? Why should we care? A little bit of an intro, even if it was just like an on-screen text telling you, this is Karl Rove, special advisor to the president. This is Paul Wolfowitz, national security advisor, yada, yada, yada. I mean, especially if I took this to show some of the kids I'm going to uni with right now, they'll be like, these kids were fucking Muslim. These kids were like 2 when this film came out, right? Like,
yeah.
or they would barely remember him being president. So, like,
Yeah.
I mean, they're not going to know who these people are. So,
Yeah.
unless you're really keen, that part might be a little confusing for you as well.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
Overall, I think that it is an effective film and an interesting one, and worth seeing if it's a period of history you're interested in. If you're interested in US politics like me, you'll probably enjoy it. Don't expect too much. It has a 50 on 56, I think, is the meta score. 50 on IMDb at 56, and it's got a IMDb score of 6.3. Both a little low for me, and maybe 6.3 a little close to the mark. I would have thought 60 to 70 would have been my guess on the Metacritic. It's not bad. It's just, as I said, I think they kind of jumped the gun a little bit, and I think that left it to be a weaker product. And I think he was sort of Stone's necessity to go through and show us Bush's greatest hits. Probably didn't help.
But I think it's, as you say, I think it's kind of a good movie to kind of pair up if you're interested in kind of political biographical movies, like Frost Nixon, JFK, Nixon. You get some interesting representations. I'd even say something like The Queen by
Stephen Frears.
Yes, Stephen Frears. Those kinds of movies are kind of in a similar kind of ilk where they're telling particular stories, and having that as like a season to watch through each of those would be really quite interesting, I think.
There's something recently, like the Comey Rule is an interesting one.
You mentioned
that. I mean, again, insanely anti-Trump. But I think that one survives the jumping the gun rule because it was made about a particular moment in history. Again, though, maybe it would be interesting to have seen it made this year.
Yeah.
Opposed to last year. But I know what they were trying to do. They were trying to influence the election, but I don't think it had much chance of that happening.
Yeah. Anything else to say on W?
No, I don't think so. Other than to say, Richard Dreyfuss absolutely hated working with Oliver Stone. And they don't like each other.
Well, there you go.
The reason why he's not in it very much, I think.
I reckon so. But he definitely channeled that distaste into a generally good representation of Cheney.
He used it well, yes.
Yeah.
Now you're up next, and I think you've got lots of exits available to you.
Yeah. You delivered a lot of options, but I'm going for one of my favorite actors working today who does not get enough work and certainly does not get enough starring roles. It's Jeffrey Wright.
I don't think I even noticed him until Westworld.
Oh, really? Because you're not much of a James Bond fan, are you? Yeah, because he plays Felix Leiter in the new Daniel Craig Bond movies, and again, he's woefully underappreciated in the role. He's fantastic in it. I even like him in Lady in the Water, a much maligned M. Night Shyamalan movie. But we are going to 2005. We are going to the movie that got George Clooney the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, Syriana.
This is good. I haven't seen this in a very long time. I
haven't seen this since it was in cinemas, and I remember really liking it. I really, really enjoyed it. So for those who don't know, the IMDb plot is a politically charged epic about the state of the oil industry in the hands of those personally involved in and affected by it. This has got another pretty good ensemble cast: George Clooney, Matt Damon, a face we don't really see anymore of Amanda Peet. She had a moment.
Had 5 minutes there in the middle of a scene. Yeah, I think the whole 9 yards was her big hit.
Yeah, definitely. Christopher Plummer, Jeffrey Wright, Chris Cooper, and then a few other people that faces you'll go, oh yeah, I recognize them. And
the guy who played Dr. Bashir in Voyager is in it too.
Yeah. Alexander Siddig. It's directed by Stephen Gaghan. And I don't know if I've seen any of his other. Oh no, he wrote Traffic in 2000, but beyond that, oh, he did the screenplay for Doctor Dolittle. That's not good.
Let's not. Don't mention the war.
Yeah, he's this. This seems to be Oh, he was one of the writers for one of my all-time favorite TV shows, American Gothic.
Oh, American Gothic was one of those shows that promised so much and delivered so little.
Didn't do anything, but it was possibly my first introduction to Gary Cole.
I think Scott Glenn was in that as well.
Maybe?
I think he played like the protagonist, didn't he? He was like
Sarah Paulson was in it. I forgot she was in there.
I don't know. It was a long, long time ago.
Yeah, Gary Cole played Sheriff Lucas.
My bad.
Buck. Yeah,
of course, Thunberg. But I just remember it like everything. It was sort of really pumped up and big here. I think it was on after X Files on a Wednesday night.
Yeah, same in the UK.
And you're like, oh, we're so psyched to see it. We're like, oh.
It's like, oh,
it's just kind of crap.
Yeah, so like, aw.
I was looking forward to that. Anyway, I am looking forward. I think it might be on Netflix here.
It's also available on Prime Video. I know that, so we should be able to readily find it.
Legally available, which is a good thing.
Yay! Now let's get on to one of our other regular coming to an end sections. WandaVision. It's finished. It's done.
Episode this week.
Episode 9.
What did you make of it?
Didn't like it.
I went in with very low expectations because I think we covered it a bit last week. No one knows how to finish a series. You start a series with an incredible premise, cool story, and you're like, we're going to finish it. I don't know how to do it. Let's have some sky beams and explosions.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what we got.
Yeah. This was the big ejaculation of stereotypical Marvel movie finishes, where there's a lot of special effects and a lot of, oh shit, we need to set lots of things up for what the rest is going to happen. So there's going to be a lot of questions that we don't answer, and it's going to really be annoying. And we're going to do things that just because they have to happen. And that's its biggest flaw. You
sent me a text on Friday night going, it's Age of Ultron Part 2.
Yeah.
And I was thinking you're giving me spoilers. And you're like, no, it's just in the sense that we always talk about Ultron being hamstrung by the fact that Joss Whedon had to set up for Ragnarok. He had to set up, the next phase, the next phase of a Civil War story. Introduced Wanda at the same time as trying to tell a cool story. It was spending so much time setting everything else up. It just had no time for its own thing. It was just too long and too much. I'm not sure if it was too long or too much. It was just spent okay, they're setting up whatever Vision's going to do next. Okay, there is a setup for Secret Invasion / Captain Marvel 2. There is a setup for Multiverse of Madness. You're like, I just wanted a cool story.
Yeah, and we ended up getting a lot of neutered finishes. Like, we came out of episode 8. Obviously, ladies and gentlemen, for those who haven't seen it, this is your spoilers warning. It is up on the screen saying spoilers, so we can talk freely about it, but try and avoid major spoilers. But at this point, I think this has been talked a lot. But we came out of episode 8 with it was the flashback show giving a lot of exposition dump for the character of Wanda, what happened to her, and to get her to the point where she creates Westview. And then it ends with a big cliffhanger of Agatha Harkness having those tendrils of things around the two kids. And it picks up right from there. And it ends up being a knockout, drag-out fight between her and Agatha Harkness for a while. And then it started something really interesting of Agatha Harkness freeing everyone in Westview, and they were talking and confronting Wanda about what they had been through all this time. That was a fucking cool idea that they just chopped down way too soon. And it was like, this is No, you had something really interesting. You could have had told so much about the characters, both the character of Agatha Harkness and Wanda, and the effects that the superheroes have on people without genuinely thinking about the consequences of their actions. This is absolutely what the Sokovia Accords were all about. And you just let it die. You
And it did it
stopped
again.
it.
It did it again at the end.
Mm,
At the end of the episode, where Wanda has to walk out of town, and the people are along the streets and glaring at her, giving her, and she's
yeah,
having to put her head down and walk out with a hoodie on. And then along comes Monarch and completely absolves her of any guilt. They'll never know what you sacrificed. You had to give up your imaginary family. They only had to be kept in agonizing, hostage torture for like 3 weeks or God knows how long.
yeah,
But you had to give up an imaginary family, Wanda, so you do you.
yeah.
It seems to be one of the weaknesses of the episode, as I've reflected on it, is
Mm,
you talked over the last few weeks. Are they setting up Scarlet Witch to be a villain in
mm,
coming weeks, which would have been really ballsy and a really fascinating place to take
mm.
the MCU in the next phase? But I think they don't have the balls for it. I think they've done everything, every possible opportunity. They kept going, she did a bad thing, but she's still a hero. She's still good. She's still good.
Yeah,
All the way through. And like, don't mention the fact she might be a bad guy, right? It's just seem to be doing desperately
yeah,
everything they can to avoid that.
yeah. And so much of this episode nullifies the big reveal of Agatha Harkness, especially the catch music of it was Agatha all along. It's like, well, actually, no. In episode 8 and episode 9, it's not. She didn't really do anything. Why was she doing any of that? To test the limits of Wanda's powers? That didn't really come across. It's like, okay, the elements of the Agatha All Along video, there's like, oh, her doing magic with her hands whilst Wanda and Vision are doing their magic trick. It's like, what did she actually do in that moment? What was she testing Wanda with? Are you saying that she's the reason that Vision got the gum stuck in him, or what? It didn't make any sense. And then it was sort of like, oh, I want to know about you. So like, okay, why didn't you just fucking ask her? And oh, okay, so we get that one early scene of Agatha leeching the power. We get no explanation as to why she can do that. And come on, lazy fucking writing of episode 8. We need to make a situation where Wanda is powerless. Okay, let's have this exposition dump of runes. Oh yeah, of course. That's what Wanda's going to do, but just on a bigger fucking scale. Come on, you have proven that you are smarter writers and creators than this in the first half of the show. You can do better, and that's the biggest problem with me for the last 3 episodes. Is it has been very much the interest, the intelligent storytelling and narrative driven, the genuine character based work that has gone on dried up. Vision was just cast to the side. We have an interesting idea of having Vision and White Vision settling their differences through debate. That is interesting concept. They did it in a really boring way, and then it's just like, okay, I've got my memories back, I'm gonna fly off. They don't even, they had 2 post-credit sequences. Neither of them were about Vision being in a cabin somewhere trying to rectify all of these memories and working out which parts of him he wants to keep, which he wants to get rid of. Any character development there. Okay, you chose to instead introduce story elements for a brand new superhero that you've introduced in the TV show, and possibly lead-ins to Captain Marvel 2 or Secret Invasion, which are well in the distance. Why did you choose that? It's just
I think you're right. I mean, they had their balls didn't have the balls to do to actually follow it through, and that's why I went in expecting virtually nothing. And you know what? I wasn't, because I expected nothing. I really wasn't disappointed. I had my expectations met, which meant that, yes, I agree, it wasn't very good. And they really could have done something so many more interesting, challenging things with this episode. And I think they took at every possible turn over the last 2 or 3 episodes, they've kind of gone, yeah, you got the interesting path, the boring path. They've gone the boring path every time. Okay, do we do something really cool? The fans are going to get really fucking excited about, and just be, like I said, the word is John Krasinski is signed up to do MCU films. Maybe not this, but all the way through. Like, remember Monica was like, "Oh, I've got this aerospace engineer friend." This just peters out to nothing. Or Jimmy Woo I'm looking for this missing person. That just peters out to nothing. Who knows what you could have done with that? Like maybe, we have someone dressed like Wolverine hitchhiking outside of Westview. Do something interesting. Do something really, really out there and interesting that people want to see. Instead, they decided to go the most boring route possible. You don't even have to do anything with it. You could just have.
They even don't do anything actually interesting with Evan Peters. The reveal of him just being
Ralph
Randy Boner or whatever. It's sort of like, okay, so that casting him was literally trolling. That was just trolling because it had no connection. You didn't make that character any connection to the X-Men universe Quicksilver. You just happened to use it because you wanted to drum up conversation about it and go, oh my god, is this it? That was designed trolling. And it wasn't even okay, so Monica has been subdued because, oh shit, we've made a powerful superhero that could easily help sway the tide of combat between Agatha and Wanda. We need to put them aside. Oh yeah, he's not going to act at all like either of the Quicksilvers, and so he's not Quicksilver in any way, shape, or form. He was just a joke. Come on, give your audience a little bit of respect. And then
I agree. It was disappointing and the one thing it kind of got me thinking was, you kind of give me a bit of a spoiler last week, but if you watched the final episode preview or trailer for the final episode that was on YouTube, legitimate one, and it had Doctor Strange in it going, I have a number of questions for you. And he's not in the last episode.
Nope.
I mean, you were saying last week, why are they spoiling such an amazing moment? Well, they didn't, because there isn't one. And you're like, guys, this is getting a bit shit.
Yeah. And there's just so much that just happens. Like the sudden revelation of the evil book that Agatha has, and just laying so much groundwork down. It's like, okay, you are setting up so much stuff. Why do you feel you needed to stop this show at 9 episodes? Why? Because we already know that Falcon and the Winter Soldier is going to be 6 episodes long. We know that Loki has got an unusual number of episodes. They are very... And even Kevin Feige has come on record as saying that he is very purposefully choosing the length of these series to tell stories. Like, okay, then use that fucking time correctly to tell the story you want to tell, rather than these shitty exposition dumps that are just time wasting when you could organically reveal this information through more. Or if you don't actually want to reveal it, then you just let it lie. You move on to the important elements of the story, and then that can just be something really fucking cool that people come back to after the fact. And you have that legacy, that option to go back, and you can like, oh, I'm going to rewatch the series. I've gone back and rewatched all of this to try and understand Agatha's motives, and it's like there's what she looks at the fucking camera and says, oh, and I killed Sparky the dog. It's like, okay, why did you do that? The only thing that suggests to me that maybe at some point she was using the death of Sparky to age the kids up again, to test Wanda's abilities again, but that gets neutered. And that kind of comes through in a little bit of drop conversation where she says, "Oh, you stopped at every opportunity." It's like, well, if they were more poignant moments, then maybe that would be a more interesting point. And that element of choosing right or choosing wrong for Wanda at each point. And if she had chosen wrong, we have a scene with Agatha or anything like that. But there's never any of that. It's incredibly frustrating, and it's not because it's like, oh, my theories didn't come true. It's just
I'm not getting pissed because there was no Fantastic Four or X-Men. I knew not to expect. I know not to expect. I'm just saying that would have been cooler. That would have been exciting and interesting and fun. And what we got was pretty bland.
Yeah, it was.
Overall, the whole season was pretty good.
Yeah.
I like it. They took some chances early on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not surprised that they didn't keep that up because writers don't seem to have 10 episodes of creativity in them anymore. Mm-hmm. And if they do, I have no doubt the studio would balk at it and go, no, you can't do that. Mm-hmm. We need a sky beam and a fist fight. Yeah. But overall, I liked that enough. It was interesting. And I think it does, if nothing else, add some character to two characters who didn't have much.
Absolutely agree. It does. I guess its purpose is primarily to flesh out and expand the character of WandaVision and officially introduce her as the Scarlet Witch. Overdue, but worthwhile. It's something that she is a compelling character, and they can hang a lot of story, a lot of movies on and around her. It's very important that they've done that. I think it's very important that they've done that. I think that they should have invested maybe a little bit more time splitting the show of WandaVision between Wanda and Vision to actually allow more Vision character development, because we had some interesting character development go through for Vision, going from just the Jarvis protocol to one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And it's like, okay, this is a nice evolution of the character. Now they've kind of just hit the reset button on that. And it's like, all right, well, back to the first step for Vision again. And you know that he's not going to they're not going to make a Vision movie. It's not on the cards for a very long time, at least, unless they do a WandaVision season 2 that focuses on Vision or something. They've still hamstrung themselves, because instead of splitting a 9-episode season across 2 characters and really fleshing both those characters out and having one villain, Agatha Harkness, that was the cause and effect for each of those character development stories, they focused on one, kind of fudged it a little bit at the end, and just left another one adrift. It's like, oh fuck yeah.
Miss Foxy saying they could have been a standalone if they'd kept the sitcom premise. Vision is boring without context. I think he's boring about a character who gives him a bit of flavor.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like a Hulk movie never really worked by himself, but put the Hulk and Thor together, magic happens.
Exactly, yeah. And I don't know. It's just annoying, because it started off so good, so fresh. And I was saying at the start that this was the most compelling thing that Marvel has made in a long time, that Disney has made in a long time. But straight away, I was kind of like, I don't think they're going to do what I want them to do, and I don't know whether they can maintain this level of quality. And
they didn't.
It was disappointing. But it's a week and a half, 2 weeks before we get the next TV offering from Marvel Studios of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And it's going to be a very different genre and style of TV from the looks of it. So who knows what we're in for? My hopes are low.
It seemed very actiony. It doesn't instantly say exciting to me. And I always felt like Wanda and Vision had more potential as characters than Falcon and Winter Soldier do. But in Marvel, we trust.
Well, we know what we're going to get with Marvel.
Hey, look, at the end of the day, the only reason the finale of WandaVision was so bad, was so disappointing, was because the rest of it was so good.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you never scale those heights, like if this is strictly mediocre all the way through, I'd be surprised because I don't really seem to do that very often.
But then also, me and you seem to be the polar opposite to pretty much everyone else in the world, where most people seem to kind of go, oh, I don't know if I like it when WandaVision first started, and then you get more and more people like, oh, that's the most I've cried in a TV show in so long. It's like, what part? Wasn't emotional at all for me. But
no, you're right. I mean, I think, but people sometimes they get fooled. I think they get bamboozled. They're like, oh my god, I love this show because it's some cool shit happening. And then once they're on board, they just completely forgive it, anything.
Yeah.
And I would say both of us are not. We are fairly open-minded to criticize things we enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. Sign of the times. Yeah.
It's supposed to be sign of them. Yes, sign of the times. I guess fans, people get really interested in things. Like I mean, it is interesting when they eventually turn. Like you get the Star Wars fans. They sat through 3 prequels. It took until Rise of Skywalker and The Last Jedi before they really jumped off. So it's not surprising.
I'm curious as to how the test of time will judge WandaVision. I wonder how people are going to look back on it, because a lot of people, now that Endgame has kind of put a nice bow on a lot of the Marvel stuff, people are kind of looking a bit more fondly at Age of Ultron now. And I remember that being a not necessarily a dark spot on MCU, but a criticized spot, shall we say.
It was a backward step. After the first Avengers movie, Age of Ultron was a backward step.
Yeah.
So I think it was kind of one of the first times to kind of like, Marvel's done well today. Can they keep it up? And I think the answer has obviously been yes. But that point in time, I think maybe we were a little bit like, is this going to be the Batman Forever of the MCU, right? The moment where you go, I'm still on board, but I don't know I like where this is going.
Yeah. But this does bring our semi-permanent section of the show to an end, and we're not going to have any new superhero stuff, so to speak, next week, because Zack Snyder's League of Justice, Justice League, is coming out on the 18th, so that's on Thursday next week, and Falcon and the Winter Soldier is on the 19th. So it's going to be a bumper episode in a fortnight for superhero newness.
I'm sure our fans, our bots, are probably going to be happy if we don't talk about superheroes.
I really like how they talk about the superheroes.
Exactly. It's all we talk about. Should we move on to people who were kind of superhero? One kind of was.
Yeah.
In Daisy Ridley and Tom Holland's Chaos Walking at the actual theater.
Yes. A real movie.
And if you are one of our American friends, suffering jocks, we are allowed to go to the movies. And you don't have to wear a mask. I think you're probably supposed to wear a mask, but I didn't.
It's nice kind of just being able to take it off. And I love having a more empty cinema. I really do.
It is. It's like, this is my favorite thing to do, was to go to a half-empty cinema. So this is the 2021 action sci-fi adventure starring, as I said, Tom Holland, Daisy Ridley, in a dystopian world where there are no women and all living creatures can hear each other's thoughts in a stream of images, words, and sounds called noise. So we meet Tom Holland, who plays Todd. And we were never going to know. We very rarely hear that name throughout the film. You're going to have a hard time.
Yeah, you're going to have difficulty remembering his name.
And we see him walking through a forest, and there's sort of a streamy cloud thing hanging over his head, and we can almost hear him talking to himself. And we quickly learn this is what's called noise, and that he is not actually on Earth. He is on a planet called the New World. And on this New World, as I sort of noted in the synopsis, everyone can hear each other's thoughts. So he has to work very, very hard when a preacher who he doesn't seem he's rather afraid of rolls up on a horse to keep his thoughts under control. And his way of doing it is repeating his name to himself over and over again, which gets a little bit annoying. Then we learn a little bit more about where he lives. He lives on a farm with his dad's, I guess, which is sort of tangentially linked to a village called
Prentice Town.
Prentice Town. And there are no women in Prentice Town. And as far as Tom Holland's character is concerned, he has never seen a woman. Girl,
and he is the youngest person in the settlement.
And there at the same time we meet Daisy Ridley. She's on a spaceship in orbit, and we learn that the planet that Tom Holland is on is a planet that was colonized with people from Earth. And the next sort of group of arrivals, and Daisy Ridley, along with the rest of her team of scouts, sent down to figure out what happened to the first batch of people because they've not heard from them since they landed on the planet. While her probe is flying down from the spaceship to the planet, all the guys, as soon as they cross into the atmosphere, they start to experience the noise as well, in the sense that they can hear the thoughts of everyone else around them, and everyone else can see their thoughts, and they freak the fuck out and somehow manage to crash their spaceship in the process. So, just to be clear here, this is a spacefaring civilization which has figured out how to create craft which will travel millions of light years, God knows how far.
Cryogenically freezing
people colonize an alien planet. But their spaceships cannot land remotely. They must be controlled by human beings.
Yep. And
we can do that today, for fuck's sake. We just landed on fucking Mars.
Yep.
But yes, okay, well, forget that, right? So that really just kind of bothered me, right? Why the fuck would they be? It'd be
there's a lot of dumb in this movie.
A real lot of dumb in this movie. So the probe crashes down near Prentice Town. Todd discovers the wreckage, tracks down Daisy Ridley's character, who is Viola, and she is taken to the local mayor, who we've met a little earlier because Tom Holland had a run-in with his son. His son, played by Nick Jonas. As I mentioned earlier, the Mayor Prentice is played by the incomparable Mads Mikkelsen. Where, like I said earlier, instantly I'm like, oh, he's the bad guy. I mean, you don't hire Mads Mikkelsen to play the hero, do you?
He's the kind, caring guy.
The guy who played Hannibal Lecter is not playing the good guy, right? So, like, oh, that's the bad guy. And when we start to learn a little bit more about what's going on here, in the sense that women do not experience the noise.
Yep.
So, in the sense that their thoughts can't be heard by men and, I imagine, other women around them. But they can, because the noise that streams out of men's heads, they can hear all the thoughts of men around them. We learn at this point that Mads tells her, Mayor Prentice tells her that that an alien species called the Spackle actually murdered all the women, which is kind of a dumb name for the aliens. Came into town and murdered all the women. That's why there are no women there. And he's very, very, very interested in what's going on with her spaceship and when it's going to land. We don't get a lot of we get some very dumb explanation about why that is happening. We quickly learn his intentions are malevolent in the sense that he wants to figure out where his spaceship is landing so he can take it over and then rule the planet. And speaking of the dumb, I was like, so we already know that, well, we just saw that there are people awake when they land their ships, because they just saw that and they fucked them up. But apparently this time they won't be. He's pretty sure they won't be awake. They'll be all asleep when they land their ships next time. But they're landing their ships on an alien planet, all asleep, but there'll be no security. meaning anyone could just waltz in while we're all sleeping and just, take the keys, and take it down to Chapel Street and do some donuts. Like, that's okay. That's what they'll be for. Like, there'll be no kind of defenses or doors or
no robot sentiency. Like, you are unauthorized to be on the captain's deck.
Michael Fassbender isn't there, like shit. Like, we saw it in Passengers, right? Like, Chris Pratt had like weeks to try and melt that door, but he couldn't get in there, So I'm like, that's a very, really, actually quite poor plan. Like, do you really need to take over the whole planet? Like, what exactly is your motivation in doing it? And the plan is very weak.
Yeah, I think the biggest sin of this movie is the fact that it is, we haven't mentioned this before, but it is based on a young adult novel series of trilogy, and this is so planned as the launch of a franchise.
This was the next Hunger Games, the next Allegiant.
Exactly. It has got hot young talent. It has got a recognizable, accredited, talented actor as the main villain, and it sets all these really interesting little points. So like, oh, the spackle. Ooh, interesting. What is the noise? Where did it come from? Why are there no women? All of this stuff is like, there's actually an interesting concept here. None of it is given any time. They didn't kind of go, you know what? Okay, let's just tell one story in this movie. No, we're gonna lay out everything, and they don't do a good job. And I'll tell you something that is really, I was kind of offended by the things that just kind of floating across the men's noise that you heard, conversations and thought processes are like, this is kind of an anti-male movie. It doesn't paint men in a good light.
It's certainly not positive. I would just sort of like, that was also that hello to Crash Bandicoot who's watching, I assume.
New subscriber to us on the YouTubes.
YouTube's. Hopefully, you're not going to start talking about Airplane in the DVD. That would be annoying. But that is a reference. But you're right. Like, the things that Tom Holland is thinking about, the amount of times that he's caught in embarrassing thoughts by Viola, and you're like, look, I was 17 once. It was about 460 years ago. But I remember, I'd like to think that given a world where I grew up on a planet where everyone can hear every single one of my thoughts, I might have developed a slightly greater degree of mental discipline. And, not think about myself shagging the girl who's sleeping next to me. Like, like everyone can hear all my thoughts. Now, 17-year-old for Earth, probably going to do that, right? Because you're not used to having your thoughts read. But this kid grew up on this planet completely having everyone be able to hear everything he's thinking.
Yeah,
and you're right. It certainly doesn't have a very high opinion of its male characters.
And one of the sequences that was most telling to me was how they portrayed Tom Holland's character dealing with the death of his dog. It just felt so hammy and sort of like, oh yeah, this is how guys deal. They don't want to show their emotions. It's like, but you've set up a world where you are literally showing the emotions. So why is he hiding it? Why is he so bad at hiding his noise compared to everyone else? And why is he even trying to put up this facade when it's so fucking obvious what is actually going on? It's like, no, you're just... Come on, dude. What the fuck?
I saw One Division. Don't worry, Cortex. I don't get it.
My sister Coco is traumatized because she thought it was going to be a normal sitcom, but I tricked her. Okay.
Well, yes. That is a nice trip. At least you showed us something interesting. One thing that bothered me about the noise as well is it's very inconsistent.
Yes.
There's a lot of spaces in the film where he's not giving out any noise. I'm like, he's thinking about nothing. I don't think so. You're always thinking about something, right? But like, I wish I was at home with a big bag of potato chips. Potato chips. And you're like, but he's not, he's not giving anything out because the plot doesn't need him to be giving any noise right now.
Yeah. And speaking of which, you know, there's numerous people that ask the question or comment about why Mads Mikkelsen's apprentice guy is so good at hiding his thoughts. It's like, okay, are you gonna tell us? Oh no, you just sent him off down a big pit and possibly killed him, but probably not because you want to have other movies and he's probably gonna come back. But
well, any other movies now. It's worth noting. So as George indicated at the start of this film was shot in 2017. This has been sitting on a shelf for almost 4 years. Now, there were about $15 million worth of reshoots done. I believe they were done at some point in time in 2019. So, as you might imagine, I think they got these 2 stars just before they really hit the big time. I mean, like Daisy Ridley was coming off The Force Awakens, but they weren't quite as big as they are now.
Yeah.
So it was a busy 2 years for Tom and Daisy. So, you know, once they finished their original shoot, it took them 2 years to come back to finish this. I think some people I've read go, oh, they look so much older in some scenes. I've got to be honest, I didn't pick that up.
No, me neither.
But so nicely done to the makeup department and the special effects guys the DOP who got that right. But at the same time, you've really got to worry about a film that sat in the shelf for 2 years. They were like, they didn't want to release this. It was so bad the way it was that they waited 2 years for pickup shots. Then they waited 2 years to release it at the cinema. And the only reason it's getting a release right now is because of COVID. Like, if this was normal times, this film would have gone straight to streaming. It would have popped up on fucking Netflix one night. You'd be like, those guys did a movie together?
Yeah. I feel like this would have been a perfect movie for Netflix to have purchased, put their name on, and has gone, oh, from the people in Spider-Man and Star Wars, because we can't stream either of those franchises on our platform anymore. Here are the actors and something else they did.
It was weak. I mean, it wasn't bored. You know, I wasn't bored. I wasn't sitting here going, oh, hurry up and finish. It was fine, but it was so much dumb. And you're kind of like, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Why is he doing this? There was a scene, one of my more interesting scenes in the film is Daisy and Tom. I forget the characters' names. Viola and the other guy.
Viola and Todd.
They have to make it basically. The basic plot is a chase movie. Yeah. They leave Prentice Town to try and get Daisy to safety in a nearby town. And while they're on this journey to the next town, they encounter one of the spackle. Who I thought was interesting. Like instantly, I was when they said, "Oh, the spackle," blah blah blah. I'm like, "Is this like the Village? Did the spackle not exist?"
Yeah.
And so they do exist, and it was actually a really lazy CGI alien who looked at home.
It looked a bit like they just, without actually improving the CGI of it, they just took the alien from Signs.
Exactly, it's not Alien.
Yeah,
like it's like they've employed Bethesda to do the special effects. Here's one we prepared earlier.
No one will know this is from 2002.
Let's reuse some assets. The alien, I'm like, okay, it's cool. And it's an interesting little fight scene where Tom, who thinks the spackle killed his mother at this point in time, goes nuts with his knife and tries to kill him. But Daisy, Viola, says, "Hey, don't kill him, despite the fact, as far as she knows, it's a fucking alien. And the first alien she would have ever seen in her life. I don't know about you. I'd be kind of scared if I saw a 7-foot alien who apparently goes around killing women. So, you know, she talks him out of killing him, and he steps away, and they walk away from each other with a spackle alien.
Never heard from again.
Seen again in the film. I'm like, we get to the big finale. You know, Mads is doing his thing. He's, you know, being an arsehole. He's using his control of his noise to beat the shit out of Tom Holland.
The circle. The circle is me.
And he's like, I have a pretty good. I mean, I said to you, actually, your superpower is knowing everything that's going to happen in the film way before it happens. And I imagine that happened to you in this as well. Because seriously, like I was sitting there going, oh, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and I specialize in just absorbing myself into a film. But like I was thinking, going, yeah, yeah, okay. But what I didn't get right was I was just assuming at the end of the film, because we've spent so much time building up the spackle, we had the big scene with the two of them having a fight. They walk away. He doesn't kill the spackle. You know, but maybe the spackle will come in and actually reveal themselves to be, you know, not the malevolent force that they've been built up to be, but instead be the friendly aliens. Or, you know, at least he by sparing that spackle's life, he's now, you know, won their respect, and, you know, like he's won a life debt, like from a Wookiee. You know, no.
So there was one element that I kind of liked it, but they didn't do enough of it, and it was almost kind of a blink and you'll miss it moment. And that's when Viola gets attacked by Aaron, the priest guy, and his noise is just going crazy, and it's like fire whipping around him, and it comes through that he wants to be punished. And it's like, ooh, that's interesting. And then it's like, okay, you set him on fire and he burns. Okay. You killed an interesting thought.
I'm quite glad the film isn't king shaming, right? If he wants to get punished in the privacy of his own heart, you know, there's no one's business between him and the person he's engaged to punish him. It was nice seeing a healthy, you know, a healthy depiction of a sex positive member of a clergy, because there are so few. Well known for that.
Well, I don't know. It's a member of the clergy chasing. They're supposed to be about 17 years old. Both of them. It's like,
hey, it reflects reality. Okay. A little bit old, don't you think?
A little old for my tastes, but I think I can satisfy this one time.
I'm going to hell. But yeah, that was really irritating. But they set this whole alien species up and did nothing with it. They set up this preacher guy as having an interesting story, or something interesting was going to happen with him, because there was a conflict between him and Mads Mikkelsen. There was a disagreement between them about the best way to proceed. And I thought that would provide an interesting, an interesting sort of spot for a bit of dramatic tension between those two. Yeah. Someone we thought was a villain, he does kill a dog, so, you know, I mean, you probably know coming back from that. But, you know, there's also the scene that Nick Jonas, the Mads Mikkelsen, the mayor's son, kills Tom Holland's dad, or one of them, and just shoots him. And you're like, oh, he's going to cop it later. Nope. He just disappears at the end of a movie with the rest of the guys. That was, So the other interesting, I guess one positive I'd like to bring up on, there was an insinuation, and only an insinuation, of the fact that because there were no women, that Tom was raised in a loving same-sex relation by same-sex parents. Yeah, that was interesting. Now, that is not done very often in sci-fi. It's not done often in Hollywood, and it's done even less in sci-fi. When it is done in sci-fi, it's kind of done pretty often either like in Star Trek Discovery now, where it's slapping you in the face the whole time. Yeah, they're being so obvious about what they're trying to get at, and they're doing it because, you know, diversity. Or in Star Wars, we're like, but did you notice right in the background behind the spaceship, slightly blurred to the left of that tree over there, there's two women, or what could be women. If you squint, you know, and dump if you only got a 4K TV, you could almost see two women kiss at the end of the film, right? Because we're diverse and we represent. But we'll cut that scene out for China just in case. You know,
we don't want to offend the biggest growth market.
So, you know, that's a kind of I mean, you know, there was, of course, I think in Star Trek Beyond, they had Sulu had a boyfriend or something, but again, it was
it was a blink and you'll miss it moment.
Blink and you miss it, and it was kind of handled in a very, you know, we're doing this because, you know,
we're cool too.
They're ticking the diversity box, and like again, and I don't think actually, I don't think you know, a lot of people were particularly cool with it. His name escapes me right now, but the guy who played Sulu in the original series, I can't believe I can't think of his name.
George Takei.
I don't think he was too keen on that either.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. But so it was interesting to see an actual, a normal, logical, and really affectionate same-sex couple just parenting a kid because there's no women, right? So
Yeah.
what are you gonna do? And so I mean, I don't know if that's like would be seen as like maybe not so cool because they've ever stopped it, being homosexual due to the fact there are no women. But I think any representation is a good one.
I like the fact that it was just so casual. It was just, we're not gonna have that adorable moment where one holds the other one's hand and it's like they're there or anything like that. It's just, this is their world. They have come to terms with whatever their thought process is, from having women around them to finding comfort in each other. It's just like, nope, these guys live together. They're the parents to Tom Holland, and that's it. We're not going to talk about it. We don't need to. We've just shown that this is, in spite of it being a hard environment, this is a loving home that Tom has lived in.
And it's just there. We don't have to have a big flashing sign going, "This is our diversity. This is our diversity." And it's no, "Hey, she's not alone. She's got us." Kind of moment like they always come back to with Marvel. This is how you do it. If anyone's wondering about why I criticize so many of the big companies and why they do it, is because I think they do it in a way that's completely unnatural. This is really natural and nice. I don't know if it gets actually ever clear which one's really his dad.
Yeah.
It's a guy who survives and helps out later on, but
I'm not sure. I got confused because I thought that was him, and then there was something about there was some line, I think, about not actually being. Oh, I've just lost Travis. Hopefully he'll come back. But there was a line in this movie about possibly. Oh, he's back. He's coming back. He's in the.
I see both of us. I can't see you anymore. But
can you see me now?
Yes, I can. Excuse our technical difficulties, listeners and viewers. We have a feral bandicoot in the vicinity of the show who seems to be causing some trouble.
It's but thankfully he's not being affected by global warming. I think we've talked enough about chaos walking. We've spent too much time on it.
One quick question: would you recommend it to someone?
If they've got young kids and they want something to put on in the background, yeah. Otherwise, no. Its cardinal sin is it's kind of boring.
It's not the worst film I've ever seen.
Well,
but that's not saying very much.
We've watched plenty of Katherine Heigl movies overall.
You can only help with possums. Well, possums are bandicoots, aren't they?
No.
They're the same thing. It's possums, bandicoots,
they're marsupials?
Rats,
yeah.
Foxes, they're all the same.
No, foxes are not the same as bandicoots and possums. Foxes are not marsupials. Wait, is a possum a marsupial? So. I don't know.
I will
Let's move on to more interesting things.
Yes.
So I'm going to just quickly talk about Clarice episode 4. I'm not going to spend any time on it, but I'm now hooked. Episode 4, it's finally really bringing some interesting things together. The amount of time that they've spent building each of the characters up and introducing them and slowly weaving the story, it's good. It's getting good. So I'm in for the rest of the 10 episode run, I think it is. So I will have more to talk about probably next week.
Upvote to you for sticking at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's taken a long fucking time to get there. I mean, 4 episodes in and I'm finally invested. It's just been... it's like watching a kettle boil, and it's finally got there. But it's good. I think if you can get through a lot of heavy narrative build up, then hopefully it'll pay off. But we'll see. The thing that I really do want to talk about though is a Vietnamese movie that is on Netflix, and I was somewhat taken aback. It's called Fury, Furie, and there are elements. There's a lot of obvious elements of sort of like you think of like Old Boy, Chan-wook Park style violence with Taken Liam Neeson sort of like, oh, my loved one has been taken, I'm going to seek revenge. This is along those lines.
Is there another title?
Uh,
It's not on IMDb under that Furie.
Furie, yeah.
Oh,
Hang
there
on,
we go.
let me
So right
just.
there you go. It's kept taking me to Fast and Furious. I got it now. No, it's not a
Yeah,
Fast and
here we go.
Furious movie. I think I'm comfortable saying that. Yep.
It is also its Vietnamese name is Hai Fung, which is the name of the lead character, an actress called Veronica No. So Veronica No stars as an ex-gangster who is lying low in the countryside after becoming a mother, but she can't escape her violent past when her daughter is kidnapped. And this is pretty good, actually. The action sequences, Veronica No is really good with the fight sequences, and the fight sequences are brutal. There is an element of comedy to it. I don't know whether it's intentional or not, because most people in Vietnam, because cars are incredibly expensive to run in Vietnam, most people have motorbikes and like tuk-tuks and things like that. And so there's a chase sequence where the kidnappers have got the daughter and they're going along the river, and she just steals a moped and starts going after. But it's like kind of a comical slow car chase, because it's like, but with this interesting dramatic music. But it is kind of a weird setting, because it's like, okay, this is a serious moment and they're filming it seriously, but it's just that noise. so it kind of pulls away from it a little bit. But then this is a really good movie for telling, going through and doing kind of the Memento Chris Nolan thing of a lot of flashbacks to elements of the character, and it just informs. They do it intelligently, though, where in the narrative storytelling, as you're watching the movie from beginning to end, it informs for the characters' actions, reasons, and thought processes, and explanations as to why this mum, who is a debt collector in a podunk town on the couple of hours outside of Ho Chi Minh, why she is violent, why she is a good fighter. And it's eked out throughout the story, and it just continues. You continue to get more and more invested in this character. And there's a final fight sequence that she has with the leader, because it seems like they set up this world where the gang leaders seem to all be women, and they're all fucking nuts and vicious. Like, you just see flashback sequences to Hai Fung just being told by one of the girls who works in a nightclub, oh, that arsehole's here. And she just gets up, walks over, grabs a bottle of beer, and just completely just smacks purposefully right in this guy's cheek, so that she's aiming for his fucking eye, and she just slams his head down and tells him to get the fuck out. And it's like, holy shit, these people don't take no shit. This is cool. And the other boss, one of the other bosses, is this other woman who is just vicious. She kind of looks like a character straight out of a goddamn Mortal Kombat movie. She's leathers with braided hair coming on one side, shave on the other. She just looks tough and like an MMA fighter. And she and Hai Fung have this fight sequence, and the end of it, what Hai Fung does, weaponizing the knife, it's quick, it's brutal, and I was just like, holy fuck, did I just see that? And I had to rewind and watch it again. So like, that's fucking cool. That was cool. And it's a good payoff. So it's a really good action movie out of Vietnam that I had no idea about. And it's like, okay.
Would you describe it as a kung fu movie?
I suppose so, yes. But it's like, very much think Taken with martial arts. set in Vietnam. And when you think of, most people who haven't been to Vietnam will just think of like the rice fields and a lot of mopeds and things like that. And then you go into the cities where it's, lots of bars and nightclubs and neon lights and just this city that comes alive at night. That's all on display here. But you get a little bit more information about kind of some of the society that goes on around it, and a little bit of hierarchy of the expectations and of people's jobs that they have. And there's the mother-daughter story is actually really good. It's told really well in this great way that just is the driving force behind everything about Hai Fung's character, and it pays off nicely as well. You kind of get to the end of it and go, whew, okay, that was a roller coaster. I enjoyed that. All right, cool. I recommend it.
Yeah, you don't come across a lot of Vietnamese cinema.
No.
The actress who plays Hai Fung,
Veronica No.
Veronica No has a little bit of work in the States. She was Rose Tico's sister in the one of the Star Wars movies, The Last Jedi. So I think that was her in the bomber at the start of the movie, I imagine.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And yeah, so she's also been in The Old Guard and the Spike Jonze film last year, The Five Bloods. So she's obviously going places. She was in a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon sequel. Won't hold that against her. I didn't see it, but come on. That film was so good.
It got pretty lambasted. But yeah.
I think it's a Netflix film as well.
It was one of the big acquisitions of Netflix before they became the bargain bin of movies. It wasn't great. But never mind. Yeah.
Anyway, it's interesting. It's nice to see a bit of world cinema.
Yeah.
And I think I said it a few weeks ago, the spotlight on stuff from other territories that Netflix has been acquiring or making in those territories now popping up in high-profile spots on Australian and hopefully American Netflix.
Yeah.
Give us a chance to broaden our horizons. I hear people talking about Dark quite a bit.
Apparently that's very good.
Yeah. There's a Japanese one that keeps popping up on my Netflix that I've heard some people talk about as well. So I just sometimes I'm so tired afterwards. I haven't got the energy to read subtitles.
I've been learning Vietnamese for nearly a year at this point.
How is that going? Did you find yourself picking up occasional words or phrases?
Like out of 100 words, maybe 3, and it's like, I knew that. I missed everything else. Like they said sorry. They definitely said sorry. Of course,
I know.
A British person is going to learn.
Oh no, that would be a Canadian person, wouldn't it? Sorry, eh? I can still watch a movie in Russian and pick up, probably 3 out of 100 words here and there.
That's been done, yeah.
Or Nichivo or something which means nothing. A lot of words that you'll pick up on the common ones, and you'll go from there, I'm sure. But the best way to do it is once you're able to travel again and you're able to visit Vietnam and you are completely immersed and surrounded by it for God knows how long.
That's the only way I'm ever able to remember any Italian or Spanish.
I think it's the best way. It worked for me. Like 4 weeks in Russia, because all the work you're putting in now will pay off. I think. And take this from somebody who's never learned a language in his life.
The big thing is write it down, and I can I'm starting to actually learn to translate a lot of the grammar, because grammar in Vietnamese is really weird. But then when it's just spoken, it's so quick. It's like, oh, whoa, what? I need to learn the phrase, please slow down. But the first phrase that Duolingo tried to teach me is the goat is at the Ferris wheel. So I think I'm a long way off from please slow down.
I think I told you that first thing I learned in Russian was I'm not American. Important in that part of the world.
Fortunately, they do speak a lot of English in Vietnam.
Yeah, a lot of tourists, right? Stuff. So yeah.
Now, that is my quick little review of Fury and just Clarice winning me over. Do you want to talk about Bill and Ted?
Yes. So this is now available on Stan, I think, in Australia. On the streaming. It's been popping up for rental, I think, on Prime for a while. But I'm like, as I say every week, fuck you. I'm not paying extra. This isn't the 90s. I'm sorry, guys. You don't get to rent movies anymore on a streaming service. I think that's shit. Anyway, Bill and Ted Face the Music is the long-awaited third film in the Bill and Ted saga. Once again, we have Keanu Reeves playing Ted and Alex Winter coming back to play his first actual proper starring role since 1993.
Wow. What movie was that?
God, don't ask me. It pops up a lot in the trivia, but it's the first one he's done. He's done bits and pieces, guest spots here and there. It's called Freak. He was in a film called Freak in 1993.
Okay.
I think might have had a bit of Keanu in it as well. But Brooke Shields, wow. So he's mainly focused on directing, I think, these days. So you actually have to take acting lessons again to get back into the swing of this. But I think he's been working on that. Both of them have been trying to get this off the ground for a while, which is surprising to me that with Keanu on board, he says, yes, I'll do it. And I have to imagine he didn't do it for very much because this is pretty low budget shit that you wouldn't have someone who's willing to fund it. But it took a very long time to get the funding up, and here they are. Once told they'd save the universe during a time-traveling adventure, two would-be rockers from San Dimas, California, find themselves as middle-aged dads still trying to crank out a hit song and fulfill their destiny. This is directed by Dean Parasot. I don't know how to pronounce that.
He directed Galaxy Quest.
He directed Galaxy Quest, which is one of the funniest science fiction comedies you'd ever want to see.
It's one of the best, it's possibly the best Star Trek movie of all time.
Yeah, I'll pay that. The All owes it a debt. And he's got some heritage. He's got some runs on the board. And we have main stars. We have Kirsten Shaw playing Kelly, who plays Rufus's daughter. Rufus, of course, played by the great George Carlin. Yep. In the original two films. His actual daughter is called Kelly. So it's a bit of a nod to his
little nod, yeah.
Naming his character Kelly. We have Keanu, Bill, and Ted are still working to record their hit song that will, change, save humanity, unite humanity, and save the universe, and blah blah blah. They're still living with their princesses, Elizabeth and Joanna, who are played by different actresses again, and they have a daughter each now. Keanu Reeves' daughter, played by Bridget Lundy Payne, is Billy. And Alex Winter's daughter, Thea, played by Samara Weaving, nod to yet another Australian actress kicking goals in the United States right now. And the daughters, I think, may well be the best part of the film. Okay. I've read a lot of really positive things about this film. It's got a 6.1 on IMDb. It's got a 65 Metascore. I found it a bit weak. Okay. In a week in which I watched Coming to America 2, which I won't spend a lot of time on, I'm going to say it. I don't want to say I liked it, but it wasn't anywhere. I've been talking that film down for months. Coming to America 2 is nowhere near as bad as I thought it would be. It was pleasant enough. Okay. If you're a fan of the original, if you don't like the original or have not seen the original, keep walking. You're not getting anything out of that. So interesting that I came around to watching Bill and Ted Face the Music. And I didn't like this very much at all. I found it kind of lame. Miss Foxy, were you saying Coming to America 2 was worse than Bill and Ted? Or was worse than the original? Because, of course, it was worse than the original. But Bill and Ted 2, I don't know if they've taken steps to make Keanu and Alex Winter look older than they really are, because Keanu looks way fucking older in this movie than he does in anything else.
Mm.
that I've seen in recent years. And maybe they're just the other way around. Maybe they're just doing their best to make him look super young um, in John Wick and stuff. But he looks really old here, and it's just kind of pathetic to see two characters who have basically not progressed in 30 years. I think if I had a friend who hadn't progressed or grown in 30 years, I think it was kind of pathetic. And look, I mean, this was a very light-hearted comedy. A lot of the praise it's got is because it's not cynical at all, unlike a lot of comedies these days. It's just really positive and fluffy and upbeat, positive. But I am incredibly cynical, so that doesn't really score any points for me. But at the same time, it's like, and I know they're supposed to be lighthearted comedy characters, but they're the same idiots they were 30 years ago. And that was fine when they were stoner teens. But when you're a 50-year-old man who has kids, I'm sorry, I don't know. I just don't buy you not having grown or changed or progressed or developed any new characteristics in 30 years and playing exactly the same character from the first two films. And, probably they had to play the same characters, but that's probably why the fact the sequel doesn't work. I remember Clerks 2. We're going back now.
Oh, yeah.
Now for Clerks 2. And I didn't like Clerks 2 a whole lot because Kev, we love Kev. But I don't think Kev does sincerity particularly well. It comes across a little bit forced in this film. He does Kev stuff right. But at the same time, that film did concern a very similar kind of story in a way. We had the two characters whose name escapes me right now from the original Clerks film.
Dante and Randall.
Dante and Randall, very good. I should remember that. I love that film. But Dante and Randall were kind of, almost Bill and Ted-esque characters in the
kind of.
Like, it's a little bit different. They were smart guys in brainless jobs.
Yeah.
Where, Bill and Ted were just brainless guys. But they were kind of goofy, sort of, teenage, directionless ne'er-do-wells. But by the end of Clerks 2, I mean, they haven't quite had 30 years. They've probably had 15, 20 years. But they are facing down the fact that they're adults now, and they can't be like they were when they were kids. But while Clerks 2 is a deeply flawed film, I think, in hindsight, and my God, I hope they never do Clerks 3, but Kev keeps threatening to. But I think, in fact, that I liked the fact that they decided to stare down. Kev can do laughs. He can do gross out humor. He can do gags about donkey shows in Tijuana, right? Completely filthy, humor. At the same time as trying to show a more serious side to his characters and go, these guys are now in their early 30s and they're facing down the fact that they're men now and they can't pull the same shit that they could when they were, 19, 20. And that is a transition point that I think a lot of people have to go through. And I found that an interesting concept. And maybe, obviously, that is not what people are tuning into a Bill and Ted film for.
No.
They're not tuning in for a bit of philosophy about. But I think it could have done it. It would have made it a more poignant story for me to kind of go, well, Bill and Ted grew up. I don't want a dark, gritty story. Bill and Ted are forced to grow up, maybe, and they stare down the fact that they're 50 now and they're closer to death now than they ever were before. And
especially in a society that we're in now, where there's more and more rightful pressure on parents to be better parents and make the world a better place for their kids and things like that. It's like, okay, you've got these two characters that were destined to save the world, and they've just focused on this one avenue that they were very repeatedly shown as not being any good at, of music, until they used time travel to get to kind of fix that problem. You could very easily have had this scenario where they are kind of going, okay, because it just doesn't make them very sympathetic characters if they're not good parents, if you want them to be likable and loving, and get back invested in them, then it's not the way that you show them. You don't show them as the same idiots where their actions, they've not realized the consequences of their actions.
It's not that they're bad parents. It's just that they haven't progressed as human beings. I mean, I think you can still be a goofy, brainless, 20-ish kind of guy and still be a loving kids. So a bit of plot. The basic gist of a film is they are brought back mid their 50s. They still haven't written a song to unite the world. They're brought to the future again by Christian Charles, and they're basically told, you've got 77 minutes in which to write the song that's going to unite the world, or all of existence will, the world existence will cease to be, right? The entire of the universe will collapse in on itself. And their way of doing it is kind of actually a kind of funny idea in a way. They go, well, we don't know how to write this film, so let's just go forward in time from our time period in 2019 and find the Bill and Ted's in the future who wrote the song and steal it off them. And that's kind of a cool idea. It's an interesting idea, right? Let's go into the future and steal the song off ourselves after we've written it.
Yeah.
Which isn't a bad idea. It's just done so poorly. And they continually encounter themselves in the future. And they're kind of shitty human beings for the most part in the future. And they're really shitty to themselves. And hijinks ensue as they encounter themselves in the future and they try and steal the song off these shitty future selves. At the same time, as I sort of said earlier, the highlight of a film, their daughters, to learn that this is going on and to try and support their parents, they go back in time to assemble a band to support them in writing this, song. So they go back and they, convince Jimi Hendrix and Louis Armstrong and Mozart to come back to the future and join their parents and the band. Cool. Huge props here to Bridget Lundy Payne. Whose pronouns are they, them. FYI, if you're wondering why I'm about to do it. Their performance is really incredible because Bridget really pulls off an incredible, almost channels 1989 Keanu Reeves in their performance. In the mannerisms, the facial expressions, the voice, brilliant performance. Because you go, okay, I didn't have to stop and think. They are playing Ted's daughter. Samara Weaving, by the same token, probably not. I think that's the thing. I think Ted was the more memorable character. And so Bill's daughter does again. Samara Weaving does a wonderful job again evoking, Bill, a younger Alex Winter's character from your two films. So they're really good because their characteristics fit. They're a bunch of goofy 17-year-old, kids, and being doofuses works for being a couple of 17-year-old kids. It doesn't work quite so well for 50-year-old dudes. So, and their journey back in time to collect these musicians evokes again a lot of stuff that happened in especially Excellent Adventure, which is really fun, and I enjoyed it. And then they later the other highlight of a film is a robot is sent back in time from the future to kill Bill and Ted by the future people. And the robot has a name, Dennis Caleb McCoy, which is very funny. And the robot is played by Anthony Carrigan, who plays in Gotham. He plays Victor Zsasz in Gotham. Yep.
He is one of those guys that's like you see him in a TV show or a movie. He's like, oh, he's a bad guy.
He's not a bad guy in this, though, really. He is initially. But think of the character of Death in Bogus Journey. He would be more akin to that in this. And he has some absolute, the very few laughs that are on offer in this film. He gets most of them. And he has some really good material. I was looking at, wow, he is really funny. And just his physical comedy, his mannerisms, the way he delivers his lines, I really enjoyed them. It's not that there are no laughs in this film. There are a few, especially towards the end, where they go But when the robot zaps people, they get sent to hell. So Bill and Ted actually have to go back to hell to try and rescue their daughters.
Okay.
And there actually is a scene where they're talking to a couple of demons and showing them a photo. It's a conversation between Bill and Ted and a couple of demons in hell. It was actually it was very funny. And so there are laughs in there. So despite itself, some of the gags land, but in it's 90 minutes. I think I watched Excellent Adventure 3 or 4 months ago, and that 90 minutes went like that.
Yeah,
it drags significantly more.
Oh, that's a shame.
So it's not terrible. It's just not very good. And
how's William Sadler coming back as Death?
He doesn't get a lot of work, but I mean, it's okay. He's there. He's fine. He was a little bit like the robot in this film. In Bogus Journey, Death had a lot of the best lines. You sank my battleship,
Yeah.
And it's like, I will take you back, They melted me, he was so funny in that movie. And I'm just like, he's getting 10 minutes of screen time.
Okay.
And right at the very end. So yeah, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's not good. If you are in the mood for an unnecessary remake of a film made 30 years, an unnecessary sequel to a film made 30 years ago, my vote goes for Coming to America 2.
Wow. Okay. Eddie Murphy's back, baby.
It is the most streamed movie on a streaming platform for the entirety of COVID.
Not surprised. A lot of the kind of the buzz around it was, in these hard, horrible times, it's nice to have something comfortable and fun. It's
all callbacks. It's all 100%. Do you remember this? I remember. Do you remember this? I remember. That's all it is, literally. But I love the original film, so I enjoyed.
It's not the worst trip to go on.
I enjoyed the callbacks. That's why I said if you didn't like the first one or you haven't seen it, you're not going to like it. Go with Bill and Ted.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Now, was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I do have it in my backpack, but I'm going to save it because we're going a bit long.
We're going long again, yeah.
But I have been watching Manhunt Season 2. It's about Richard Jewell. It's on Stan here in Australia if you want to catch up. But I will save that hopefully for next week if I remember.
Yeah. I've still got to actually talk about Demon Slayer on Netflix. So we'll finally get around to those things next week. So, a roundup for the episode. This has been episode 104 of the Armchair Producers. We had our chain movie, which was 2008's Oliver Stone, Josh Brolin movie. Next week, we will be talking about Syriana, following Jeffrey Wright. We talked about the ending of WandaVision. We have our thoughts on Falcon and Winter Soldier. We will have thoughts on Zack Snyder's Justice League, but they will both be released after Wednesday, so it'll be 2 weeks before we talk about those. We have a little tease that I am now invested into Clarice after episode 4. We talked about Chaos Walking at the cinema, and we're both rather disappointed with it. I talked about the Vietnamese action movie Fury on Netflix, and Travis talked about Bill and Ted Face the Music on Stan in Australia. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for another extended episode of Armchair Producers. We're not intentionally talking longer, but we just maybe have more to say. Who knows? Maybe we're just babbling too much like I am right now. But we will see you all. We will see you all next week. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on twitch.tv/thefriedbrain, Armchair Producers on Facebook, facebook.com/Armchair Producers, and on YouTube, you can go to youtube.com/Friedbrain Productions. We do appreciate it. We got our very own Crash Bandicoot subscribed today. Thank you very much for that. Thank you so much for joining in on the chat, Miss Foxy, and we will see you next time.